Okay, we are on to day 3, and today we are working on the design of our program. To do the design, we are not using some kind of fancy software. There are no wacky diagrams. We are going to be using pencil and paper. That's it. And the reason we're doing that is that this is actually both a faster and easier way to design your program. The great thing about using pencil and paper is that if you don't like your design, you can throw it away and do it again and again as much as necessary until it really starts to make sense to you. This is a powerful approach because you end up not necessarily wasting a lot of time, iterations are cheap, and it's just like a faster, easier way to do it. Plus, you should have access to pencil and paper, right? So that's kind of the approach that we're taking, and that's why we're going down that path. So let's talk about the design requirements for this journaling program. So this is a sort of daily journal program that we will be creating. It's going to be a command line program. So it's going to be something that, we run via the command line using the Python 3 command. So it'll be like Python 3 journal.py. Again, that's why for our Hello World program, we created that journal.py file. We're going to be using that a lot throughout this course. Because it's a command line program, there will be other commands that we add to it, like journal help, journal new, that kind of thing. And so that's kind of going to be something that our design has to take into account. Each command is a specific command, and you're only going to be running one command per program run. So for example, if you want to create a new journal entry, it'll be something like journal new, and then it'll go through the interaction of creating a new journal entry. But then later, if you want to view it, you would do journal view, that kind of thing. So that's the basic sort of expectation of this kind of program. That also means that there's no sort of command loop. There's no running commands multiple times in one program run. So that actually simplifies our design quite a bit. Everything becomes very self-contained. And then the last major sort of requirement is that the journal files should be just plain text files that are human readable. Again, this is just text that we're more or less writing for a journal entry. So you're really just, saving text to a file. It makes the whole process very simple. And that's what we're wanting to go with for this tutorial. The reason we're doing all this up front is that you can do better design if you understand the requirements up front. So by understanding what this program is expected to do, you are able to build the right thing. And a lot of programming comes down to understanding what you need to build, maybe why you need to build it, and then making sure that your code, your software, fulfills the needs of your users. And so this design process is going to take you through that step by step and let you understand like, oh, okay, if we're going to build this kind of program with these kind of requirements, the design ends up looking like that kind of thing. The next step is I will be showing you the designs that I have made for this program on pencil and paper, and we'll be talking through each of the different screens, and then we will go on to the assignment. All right, let's start with the default screen. This is the first screen that we're designing, and it's what the user is going to see first when they run Python 3 journal.py. So just to give you a run through of my designs, this is kind of a fake command line drawn on paper. So that if they run the command Python 3 journal.py, this is the output of what I would expect from that command. So the output's pretty straightforward. My journal 1.0, so your program title, commands, and then it just shows you a list of commands. So help, new, list, view, edit, delete. The idea here is if the user runs just journal.py, we're giving them some amount of helpful information about what they can actually do with the program. So even just by looking at this screen, you can start to see an implied list of other screens that we need to design: the help screen, the new screen, list, view, edit, delete, and so on. So this, just from one simple design, starts to imply a lot of other design work that we need to do. So let's move on to the next screen. Okay, here we have our help screen. The way that a user would get there is they'd be typing Python 3 journal.py help. Very similar to our default screen in a lot of ways, but with a couple key differences. There's a little bit more explanation about the program, and then, kind of the same list of commands. One thing I've seen with other command line programs is they might have like help for specific commands. So maybe there would be a help and then like help for new or help for list or help for whatever. We're not necessarily going there, but you can start to maybe see where these designs go a little bit. So next up is the new screen. A user would get there by typing Python 3 journal.py new. Now, here's a little bit different. So this is when a user is creating a new journal entry, and kind of a couple things start to pop out here. First, you have date, and so the user would put in the date, and then you have text here and kind of this underscore thing. So that's probably the like text entry. So like this is a sample. The idea being, so the user on this screen is going to input the date of the journal entry, and then the user is going to type in their journal entry. So you can start to see a little bit about our data structure looking at this just by saying, okay, so we have date as an input, and then we have text as an input. So kind of each journal entry is going to have a date and some text associated with it. And that starts to form kind of the data structure and how we might start thinking about what sort of code we might need to write or how this might end up working. Okay, next up is list. So this is our Python 3 journal.py list command, and this just shows a list of journal entries. So you have journal entries, you have date, and then you have text. Now, one kind of useful design detail here is you notice you have like a subset of the text or like a snippet of the text and then some dots or something like that. Given that this is a command line program, you're probably going to not want to, when you do a list of journal entries, to put a whole journal entry out there for the list because a journal entry could be really long. It could be pages long. So we don't really know from a design standpoint how long a journal entry might end up being, but we can tell that we probably don't want the list view to show more than, 30, 50 characters long of the actual text. So this little design element starts to pop in here pretty obviously. So that's kind of the list screen and probably the most important part of that. All right, we have the view screen. Now, again, the way you get there is Python 3 journal.py view and then the date. So the user would be inputting the date for a particular journal entry as part of running the command. So the result of that would be they see basically a view of the journal entry. So the date and then the actual text of the entry and so on and so forth. Now, one thing that this does start to show us is that so the way that users get to individual journal entries is via the date. So maybe that means that there's only one journal entry per date. Yeah, you can start to see how this implies a little bit more about how our program is going to operate. And we're going to follow the same sort of pattern with the other like edit and delete commands, which you will be seeing next. Okay, next we have the edit command, the edit screen. So Python 3 journal.py edit and date. Now this one looks an awful lot like the view in a certain way. The difference being we probably can only edit the text down here, right? So you probably put in the date and then the user is shown the date of this, but we're probably going to be replacing the text. We're probably not necessarily going to try and edit it. And some of that comes down to the limitations of running something on the command line. For simplicity's sake of this course, we're not going to try and edit and tweak the text. It'll be more of a full-on replacement. So this is probably going to feel a lot like the new command, but with, the sort of difference of you can't change the date, but you can change the text. So that's, I think, how this is probably going to end up working. Okay, and our last design screen is for the delete screen. So a user would run Python 3 journal.py delete and then the date entry. So you can see how we've repeated that kind of command line pattern. That also is good for the user because they start to understand and expect how this might work. One interesting thing about this design is we're asking the user, do you want to delete the entry? We show the entry and then we say, yeah, Y or N, yes or no. This is the idea that if a user says they want to delete some data, you want to ask the user, are you sure? You don't just want to go and delete data. Again, the user should, sometimes people make mistakes. There's all kinds of things that can happen. User error is a thing. So we want to be thoughtful as designers, as programmers, to actually ask, do you want to delete the data? Now, one kind of last thing about these designs is that Nothing here is set in stone. This is a design, this is an idea, this is us trying to think through the program. And so designs are not necessarily going to be what the final program ends up looking perfectly. But the entire concept behind here is that by designing these screens, by drawing them out, talking through them, thinking about the requirements, we start getting a much clearer picture of what we're building and why we're building it. And so that is how we end up building better software. So, I mean, with these screens, we can definitely look at everything we have along the way and know, okay, I need to build a screen that looks like this, and it probably needs to work that way. And that makes the rest of this process of building a real program simpler and easier. That is a walkthrough of my designs. Next up is your assignment. So the last thing we're going to do today is, of course, the assignment. And your assignment is to make your own designs for a daily journal program. Now, it would be good for it to fit the requirements of this. You know, you can definitely copy mine, but this is also maybe an interesting time for you to play around with your own designs. Now, going forward through this course, the software that we are building is going to be built around my designs for sort of obvious reasons. But you can certainly keep your designs, and then later as you develop your skills, you might want to tweak what I've created to fit more of what your idea for this might be. So that's kind of maybe a bonus thing that you might want to work on. Go have fun with your design, and then I will see you again tomorrow.